there, Brooke. How's it going today?
It's going well. It's a beautiful fall afternoon. It feels like tailgate weather, kind of fall, football weather. So excited for fall.
Yeah, it's going to be a great fall, I think. And we've got some great people to talk to today. So for those listening, Brooke has a very silly hat on. We've got some great guests today that we're going to be talking to. So Brooke, you've got to tell the story. How did you originally meet Christina? How did you originally meet Thor? And what's the origin story behind the farming hat?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I'll let Christina tell how we met, but it was so I have a little story on the hat. So the first year I was in business, I onboarded 34 partners. Every single partner I went on site to, and I had to come back with a memento. And when you have a hairline like this, you got to look covered up with some hats. So I came back with a hat from every place, and when I went to visit Christina and Thor down in Chattanooga. Obviously, everyone knows Thor. You can't miss him without his hat. He has this beautiful Austrian hiking hat. And I came back with a different hat. But let's just say about 6 months later, I got in the mail this beautiful thing, an authentic Austrian hiking hat directly from Thor himself. Well worn out, well conditioned, well seasoned, I guess you can say. Yes, I would be lying if I said I wear it every day, but like Thor. But Thor has a great story. I'm sure we'll tell at one point about how he lost his hat, or the airline lost his hat, and nobody recognized him at a conference. But we'll talk about that later.
It's a special occasion sort of thing. Well,
Yes.
Thank you, Christina and Thor, for being here. We greatly appreciate your time and you guys hopping on here. So I'd love to hear the origin story of how you first met Brooke and how things got connected, and of course your contributions to the book we're going to go through. But how did you originally meet Mr. Brooke Fouts himself?
Certainly. So we were at a conference for our property management software, and it was actually the same conference where Thor showed up and didn't have his hat. Nobody recognized him. And we were at an evening party, and somebody said, "Hey, there's this guy that works for the property management company, software company, and we really want to connect you guys." So we met at this party, and then maybe 6 or 8 months later, CJ called me and said, "Hey, are you guys still not marketing to owners?" And I said, "No, should we be?" And he said, "Yes, you should be marketing to owners." And I said, "Well, I don't know how to do that, CJ. We're not salespeople in that respect." And he said, "Well, let me get you hooked up on a call with Brooke. Do you remember Brooke? You met him at the conference." And I said, "Yes, I really liked him. He was so dynamic." And so that's kind of how we got connected.
Right on. Yeah. I feel like, Brooke, how many referrals has CJ sent your way? I feel like you owe him like many drinks, at this point.
Definitely. Yeah, he sent a bunch for sure. But the other thing, it was also Jim Olin too. I remember I was actually on site with Coconut Condos in Maui with Mike and Angie Leone. And I remember it was like 4:00 in the morning, Maui time. And I remember jumping on a call with Christina and Thor and Jim Olin and talking about it. And it was one of those things. He said, I think you guys had about 10 properties or something like that when you started. And they wanted to grow and, but they were considering, eventually exiting, but they needed to obviously grow to a certain point. And that's exactly what we ended up doing. But I'll let Christina tell that awesome story.
Yeah. So, Jim, I was amazed and impressed. Jim is a member of the Counselors of Real Estate, an organization of which I'm now a member. And so I was kind of fangirling over his real estate credentials and his experience with Resort Quest because I was hunting for more information and knowledge and expertise in the vacation rental business. And I had forgotten that Jim connected us also. So that's super cool. Yeah. Jim and those guys, Jacobia, they're amazing, David.
Was that the case, Christina, when you started with Vintory, you had 10 properties? Was that when you actually began?
We had actually, I think by the time we pulled that trigger, we had 26. But okay. Brooke helped us go backwards because he said, look at your inventory and make that quartile decision. Who is taking too much of your time and energy? Who's not returning you a lot of money? And think about maybe replacing those properties. Mm-hmm. And so we asked our team. Yeah, we asked our team and did that, basically.
And how many when you sold, Christina?
We had 52. So we had 42 active listings and 10 contracts.
Okay, right on. So there's a lot of growth going on there. Well, you
Yes.
mentioned maybe a mistake you made, Christina, and that's kind of the meat of the show. So we'll get into that. Now, this is going to be a bit of a unique format. We did some planning. I got some notes in front of me here for this episode because, of course, Christina had 10 mistakes. Thor had 10 mistakes. There was a bit of overlap. So we might kind of go to both folks here as we kind of head along. And then Thor had some mistakes that Christina didn't mention. So I'll do my best to kind of keep things straight and dive into it. So if you're okay with it, Christina, let's dive into number one on the mistake list. So number one.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Failing to help some owners understand why maintenance and upgrades are so important for safety and guest enjoyment, translating into better profitability. What was the mistake you made here, and how did you kind of work on correcting that as you went along in the business?
So, we've made every mistake in the book. We were in this business operating. Not feeling comfortable telling owners bad news. That was one of my mistakes. I feel like we had an issue with, I'm a very positive person. I'm always trying to be optimistic and encouraging. And it would have better served the owners had I been a little more clear to be kind and said, look, these are issues, these are problems with your property. And if we don't correct these, guests are maybe even at risk, but for certain are not going to enjoy the property as much as they could if we do these maintenance and upgrades. I think, that's crucial.
Yeah, for sure. And, back on your end, Thor, you mentioned a few things. Number 3 on your list was not understanding the safety points in our home sooner, even after passing the safety course with Breezeway. With Justin Ford's visit, I was blown away by what I didn't know. So one thing that I thought was interesting, Christina, in your list, you mentioned safety, not just, oh, this is going to make you more money, which is what a lot of people think. How can I get more money out of the property? But there was a safety component. Thor, what did you learn about the safety pieces and how it tied into the property upgrades and maintenance and that kind of piece as well?
I was embarrassed when Justin came because I'd taken the course and I passed it with, I think, 100 actually, and Katie was really mad at me. But I really didn't have time to take the course. I was boots on the ground working every day. So I took the course like I do all my real estate courses. I knock it out and I'm done. I passed, I'm done. And then when Justin showed up, I was so embarrassed. It was just unbelievable. And he's done an amazing job for the last 10 years, and I watch every day everything that's going on, and people don't know what they don't know. My God, they need to get safety orientated.
Mm-hmm. And what were those conversations like, either way, Christina or Thor, with the owner when you did start to make those recommendations? Hi, owner XYZ, you need to spend this money to make the property more safe. Were they receptive to that? Did they push against it? What was that? What were those conversations like?
Sure. So most of our owners were very receptive because they recognized that we were educating ourselves and making sure we understood safety and upgrades in terms of how it would be helpful for them, limiting their risk and their liability, and also ultimately making them more money and creating a cycle of excellence where guests had a great result and owners could make better returns, and that helped all of our owners. Most of our owners were receptive. We only had a few who Thor wanted to fire, and eventually I let him, that were not interested in spending the money. But most of them were like, okay, tell me what I need to do. I'll get on it tomorrow.
That's good to hear. All right, so then that dovetails me nicely into your number 5, Thor. So we're going to be bouncing around a little bit today to get everything in here. So number 5 on your list, Thor, was letting owners who did not want to spend money for upgrades stay in the program, even though we tried to explain to them that spending money on upgrades would make them more money in the long run. Now, that could be safety. It could not be, safety related. It could be revenue related. Hey, put a fire pit in the backyard or something like that. But what was kind of your approach there? What did you learn throughout that process of trying to convince that owner? At some point, they just don't want to listen or they didn't want to do it. How do you then kind of hit the eject button on that relationship? What'd you learn there?
That's a loaded question because I always wanted to fire the owners and Christina wouldn't let me. But anyway, it's just really, really hard to explain to them how it works. You have to spend money to make money. And if somebody's never been in business before, they don't understand that. And how do you tell them that? Here, give me $2,000. Let's upgrade this for this year, and let's see what the return is next year. And they just were not willing to do that. It was that's a tough task.
Yeah, one of the things we found in having some of those conversations is we were able to build sort of case studies that then we could show to other owners.
Correct.
That was incredibly helpful to be able to give them actual factual information about the changes.
Yeah, because I don't mean this in a bad way, but it can almost sound like you're guessing, with Thor's
Yeah.
kind of thinking there, like, hey, we're going to ask you to make this upgrade. We can't guarantee it, but based on our best practices. But when you can reference, like, here's an exact listing that we're working with that's doing this kind of revenue, then it's a lot more tangible. And some people need to see it for sure. Awesome.
Absolutely. Well, adults learn differently, visually, kinesthetic, and auditorily. So
that's a good point. That's a very
tell
good
me,
point.
show me, teach me.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's head on over to number 2, and we will go back to Christina's list, and go into this one. So number 2, not doing a thing because I thought it had to be perfect. Do it anyway. It's good enough. So what was kind of the lesson here about taking action, and what did you change in the business once you had that mindset?
Sure. So I think for me, I always want it to be right. I want it to be just right. I'm kind of a perfectionist in that way. And because I deal a lot in numbers, and numbers are either right or wrong. And so I have kind of that mindset. And one of the things I found in like doing the marketing and doing training with our team, that it was better not to wait for it to be perfect, but it's better to take action. So a default to action versus perfection really moves the business forward so much better. And a lot of that had to do with my lack of confidence in the business, because I want to know everything about everything before I take action. That's not super helpful, y'all. I don't need to know that, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is Conrad. This is why we've talked about this before, right? This is one of my favorite quotes: "Perfection is the enemy of innovation," and that's why we actually added the only value that we updated from the original time was we added one called bias for action. Ooh. And then the sub plot of that is slow down the big decisions, speed up the rest. And again, I think we brought this up like 3 or 4 times, but it's like most decisions you can make, really quickly. And as I think what was it Bezos said, Conrad, like there's one-way doors and like 2-way doors. Most decisions are 2-way doors. You can walk them back. So don't be afraid to take action. And like I said, slow down the big decisions. There's probably 2 or 3 big decisions you're going to make a year. Put a lot of time and thought into it. Everything else, it doesn't matter. Just act quickly. Again, Sam Altman, the former president of Y Combinator, said his number one factor he could tell was success with startups that all went through Y Combinator is they had the ability to get things done quickly. Like that was the number one trait in the most successful startups through Y Combinator.
Mm-hmm. Very
and it's
cool.
not just companies, right? It's everybody. Like any small business benefits from that for sure, especially in our space. Awesome. Well, let's go over to number 3 then, Christina. And this one is about not leveraging the power of video intentionally. I think this one's pretty novel, Brooke. I don't think we've talked about this before. So video could include showing guest properties, making homes more personal through the owners and guest stories, and then before and after of homes when you implemented the upgrades that we talked about a few minutes ago. So what was your video lesson that you learned? How did you later leverage video in the business to help it grow and get more visibility?
Sure. So fortunately, we had great team members that were willing to actually take action on stuff. And it didn't have to be perfect. They would just do it and then tweak it and do it. What we learned about video is video tells so much more of a story than some text on a page or even an audio in a conversation. And so when we were able to video interiors and our guests could self-select, and when we were able to send potential homeowners video of us talking about our origin story, we had a video of Thor where he talked about our why behind the vacation rental business. And that was like an instant result kind of a thing because people can see your sincerity and your authenticity. You don't have to like convince them. You simply speak from the heart. And if they're a match, it's a good match. And you know what? Not everybody's a match, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. Yeah, like I said, this one didn't show up much, but I like to have it in here for sure because it's an interesting way of, like you said, storytelling, and ultimately people are going to pick, kind of what they're drawn towards. So I like that one quite a bit. All right, let's go to a next one. Number 4 on your list, Christina, kind of relates a little bit to number 1 on Thor's list. So let's head over here. Wishing that I had been more intentional about team member feedback and having one-to-ones with everyone to understand better as we grew. So what was the thought process kind of with working with your team? How often did you do the one-on-ones? What did you change as it went along? And then we'll talk about hiring and predictive index with Thor.
Sure. So I think even toward the end, one of my personal mistakes is not slowing down enough to listen to our team because they were out in the field doing the job. And sometimes when they had a problem or concern, we used to have a sort of a saying about guests that if they had the concern happen once, okay, we noted it. if it happened twice, we need to think about it. If it happened a third time, we need to take care of it. I could have been more proactive with our team in listening to them about our growth, and probably we would have gotten a lot better results. But I'm so focused on tasks that I feel like my mistake is I need to be more relationship oriented and listen better.
Gotcha. And so this kind of relates a little bit to number one on your list, Thor. So number one on your list was not using culture index or predictive index sooner for new hires. So I think kind of what you're talking about, Christina, is more like the management of the people once they're on the team. Thor, yours was more related to like, how do I bring the right people in the first place? So what did you kind of learn, and what did you guys change with culture index and predictive index when you were hiring?
Well, if you bring the right people in on the front end, then you don't have the problem to deal with them on the back end.
Right.
It saves a lot of headaches and everything. With the predictive index, once we started using that, our turnover was way, way less. The housekeepers loved their job. They loved to show up and do their job. It was just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. And that was actually, I didn't actually include that. It's in parentheses in the book. Yes, profile housekeepers too. So it wasn't just people who were in the office that were doing, so-called knowledge work, right? So to speak, marketing or accounting or stuff like that. But you guys eventually started hiring even people that were out in the field doing that type of work as well. And it sounds like that was fruitful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I hear that all the time, though. Like, people are like, oh, well, I only need to hire. I'm not doing any hiring except for housekeepers or maintenance people. Well, profile them too. They're just as important, if not more important. Do you think you want a highly detailed, accurate, precise rule follower cleaner?
Yes.
Or you want somebody, you know what I mean, that has no detail, that is slow? No, you want somebody that has a lot of detail, a lot of yeah. So definitely use it for your housekeepers and maintenance people for sure.
Absolutely.
I do a different show with some other folks, and we've talked a lot about the fact that nowadays in this kind of remote check-in world, that's the only person you might interact with from a company too. Right. So your guest might only ever see the maintenance person or the housekeeping professional that's working in that property. So also, if they're not like a nice warm personality, if they don't exude the values that your brand or your company has, and they're not the right fit for your company, they're going to think that person represents your company, right?
Absolutely. So that's their only interaction, and they are. That's right, they are.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, that's a good one for sure. And it's certainly something, Brooke, that came up again and again, right? Predictive index and culture index. These are super valuable tools to have. Let's head over to number 5. So number 5, using our values to apply to our budget and make sure that we were spending where our goals were. So Christina, what was the spending misallocation that originally occurred, and how did you correct it later on in the business?
So initially, we hadn't gotten clear about our values and our goals. So it makes it really hard to apply your budget to what your goals and values are. Once we got clear about our goals and our values for our company, it made it super easy to decision make, because I get distracted maybe in the exhibit hall after a glass of wine and I want to buy all the things. So once I was real clear on what our company's focus and intention was and our values for our company, it made it a lot easier to sort and select about where we should spend money. And that ended up being more about training our people and spending money on our team and sending them to education and conferences where they could interact with other people who are doing their same role in different markets. And that was so much more valuable than the bright, shiny new penny.
I love this. I don't think anyone else ever said this, and I've never heard anybody describe it this way. But when I read this the first time, it was like a duh. Like, this makes the most sense. Like, align your goals with your budget with your goals and your values. I mean, to me, that's like the most common sense thing I've ever heard. And the fact that it was a surprise to me, it's kind of a shame that and nobody else has said anything like this. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I like that one quite a bit, for sure. Well, let's head over to number 6, which is kind of another dual one. So we'll be picking on both Christina and Thor on this one. So Christina, I wish we had hired more slowly and fired more quickly when we knew it wasn't a fit. We kind of talked about this a minute ago with predictive index and culture index, so I might go back to Thor on that piece. But what was it like when you hired the right people, I guess, and what'd you kind of have to learn with hiring more slowly and firing more quickly when it wasn't a fit? How'd you learn that?
Sure. So taking the time, like Brooke was saying, 2 or 3 decisions a year are really crucial, and you need to take time with them. And we were growing at one point so fast that we kind of panicked and started just hiring people before predictive index. And that was a mistake. And I hired people that were more like me, and we needed to hire for balance, if that makes sense. So you don't want everybody to be the same, or some of you are redundant. and you have different roles to fill to balance a company to make sure everything gets handled.
Mm. So, Thor, we kind of talked about it a second ago with the predictive index and culture index pieces, but what were kind of those lessons that you learned on that side, hiring the right person for that role, which may be very different from your personality or Christina's personality or even anyone else you have in the company, but that can be a good thing, right?
Well, the biggest thing I learned with hiring the right people is financially it was better for us because we didn't have to spend a bunch of money on training and retraining and retraining and retraining. And I've seen that in the restaurant industry a lot, And once you get the right people in the door, they're happy to come to work, and they come to work and they do their job. So financially, it was all around better for us.
Yeah, like square peg, square hole, not square peg, round hole, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Brooke, I hate to say it, this one came up again and again, right? Hiring the right people and then also firing when it's not the right fit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can beat this drum forever. I mean, this is probably one of the most popular mistakes that everyone has. Is it revolves around people, and it reminds me. I still love that quote from Clark Twitty, one of my idols. It's like, this business, as with so many others, remains very simply all about people. It contains a lot of other things, but everything is wrapped up in good people, and it's so true. But it's one of these things where one of my favorite quotes is, "Nothing will kill a great employee faster than watching you tolerate a bad one." So, yes, you may have if you may have a great team, but if you have that one bad apple, it really does infect the rest of the bunch for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is unfortunately true for sure.
Unfortunately, I can reflect that experience directly in our personal experience.
Yeah.
When your team when your team says thank you so much for finally seeing,
they're like, "Why did it take you so long?"
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not a great thing to hear, but it's also ultimately people kind of know too. You know too in your gut, don't you? When it's not really a good fit, and at that moment you kind of have to make that decision, even if it's tough. And you've talked about the pain, the 36 hours of pain as well before.
Yeah.
Brooke, right?
You know what? One thing that's actually helped me. So I'm in a group called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and it's like there's that accountability aspect of it. Like I keep coming in there, complain about somebody every single month, and then they're like, we have this like accountability thing. I said, all right, by next month I will terminate so and so. Like you need to do it, right? And it's like, and then it's like a day before or 2 days before your meeting, and you're like, oh shoot, I got to fire this person. But it's like you almost need that accountability buddy to hold you responsible. It's like you need that deadline.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Brooke, one of the things you've taught me in our conversations over the years is it's better to go ahead and let that person go because they're not thriving and flourishing in your organization. They can go somewhere else and do so much better for themselves.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You're doing them a favor. 100%.
Yeah. Right on. Awesome. Well, you got a bit of a two-parter here as well. So number 7 on your list, Christina, was not having clear, consistent, measurable processes for every part of the business. So I'm assuming you started with no processes. You built some later on. What'd you kind of learn in that process? And then we're going to go to Thor with EOS. So we'll see if we can tie those together.
Sure. So we really didn't have any processes in place. It was all in my head or Thor's head. That's not super effective for scaling an organization. So once we figured out about EOS, I think maybe Steve Trover recommended the Traction book. I read the book like in 24 hours and so many ahas. Oh my gosh, we got to go do this right away. And I said, Thor, we have to put this in place immediately. And he said, whoa, hang on, sister. Wait a second. Can I read the book? But having those, being able to turn that over like a checklist, a process, means anybody can help do a thing. And that expands the potential for scaling so much.
So Thor, it was your second one, not using EOS soon enough. What was that process like when she made you read the book? And then what was the changes you made later on throughout that process?
As a disclaimer, I didn't read the book. But anyway.
What?
I'm kidding.
It comes out.
Yeah. We did hire Sharon Keefe from Minneapolis to come down and implement our EOS with our management team. It was absolutely brilliant. Everything she went through, we were all on the same page, but we didn't know we were all on the same page. And we figured that out going through that. And then the weekly meetings every week, and it just reinforced everything that we were doing. And it gave the management team something to believe in, which transferred down to everybody else in the organization. It was just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I remember
finding
I remember finding EOS well before I was even started Vintory, and it was one of those things where I was like, where has this been my entire life? Like it all made so much sense. And what I loved about it was the concept. It was just so simple. It
Mhm.
made such simple sense, but it was effective, and it just how it all worked together. So yeah, I've been a fanboy of VOS for probably close to a decade now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's one of my secret advantages, Brooke, is that someone recommended me to that early on, when I got to read it, when I was first getting going, really before I hired my first full-time person. I'd read that book already. So I think that's maybe one of
Well,
my fair advantages.
we
Yeah.
were running EOS. I mean, I remember with two people, I was running a level 10 meeting,
Uh-huh.
when I launched Vintory, and it's just the foundation of our business. And what I love about it too is as we now have, I think 6, 7, 8 different departments, and departmental like level 10 meetings. It's
Right.
I have faith in the system. I have faith in the concept of it, rather than not knowing. Like normally, I'd be very like apprehensive and nervous around not being involved in every single department meeting. But I have trust in the system that I don't need to be there, and I know things are happening. There's a reason why that book is called Traction, because we really do get this traction in the business, and things are propelling forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, it's not titled EOS, is it? That's the framework that it teaches, but the book is actually called Traction. That's a really
Yeah,
solid point.
Gino Wickman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, by Gino Wickman. We joke, Christina, because that's like the 10th mention of it at this point on these recordings. Like he owes us commission. He owes you something, Brooke. He owes you.
At least dinner or something.
Yeah, at least. I mean, geez. He should be buying you Ravens season tickets or something like that. But all good. All right, let's head on over to number 8 on your list, Christina. Number 8, not having an annual guest marketing strategy calendarized. I got that word out. I'm proud of myself, and shared with the entire team. So what was the annual guest marketing strategy that you later calendarized, and how did you later share it with your entire team?
Sure. So one of the things I felt like is that if we had a theme going on, that we were sending guests some exciting thing that was happening in Chattanooga, book your house for this activity, that, like you said earlier, I think Conrad was, maybe that housekeeping or maintenance person is the only person that the guest ever interacted with. They should know about those activities. They should know what we're marketing. The reservations team should know, what are we sending out? What are we marketing to guests? So when they call in, that person or that they encounter in person is not like, oh, I didn't know that was happening. It makes us look sort of wishy-washy and not professional. And so having those things that we're marketing to guests and sharing with owners activities that are happening. We used to do a thing where we would share with owners what was happening and ask them to rent somebody else's house. Come into town, but don't block your own house, right? Come rent somebody else's house, get a discount. But so that everybody was on the same page. And I think that's part of the traction part, is getting everybody on the same page, having the values. Everybody's on the same page. So calendarizing that marketing, putting everybody on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. I don't think, Brooke, that one came up a lot, but I mean, we talked about marketing and pieces and branding. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't come up much, but I think more companies do it. I mean, not all companies do it for sure, but more companies do the marketing calendar for guests than they do for owners for sure. I would say less than 1% or 2% probably do an owner marketing calendar. It's like I've always said that most people's idea of owner marketing is lobbing out one postcard a year and like, oh shoot, I got to do this, They haven't laid out so that was one of the things, like when we onboarded, Christina and Thor, we laid out a 12-month calendar. Like, all right, we're going to do emails like on this cadence. We're going to be sending direct mail on this cadence. And we had it all laid out for the entire year, right out of the gates. But again, I think that's probably a top 1% kind of play, which again blows my mind, because we know again how valuable inventory is. And doing this, and this might be allude to one of your other mistakes, Christina, but it's like just having that proactive outbound approach. Not too many companies are doing for sure on the owner marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's head over to number 9. It's a bit of a different one, but it does call back a bit to video. So number 9, not having a video of the interior and exterior of every, it says in here, stinking home we managed. So this kind of ties back to the video storytelling piece. How did you later get video for all the properties? Because you're in a more kind of remote destination, right?
We are a very rural market for our location. I think I never got it fully implemented before we sold, but we started doing video inside the homes. We also started having, like when Thor would go in to do maintenance or something, he would do a video, or Katie would make a video of him, or Jen would do a video of something being at a house. And the idea started with Thor's office pictures. He used to take a picture like off the deck, off the bluff, or off the Pot Point house at the river. And he would say, my office today. And so we started thinking about, well, if we could communicate that to our potential guests, like if we could show them what this experience is like, then they can self-sort, self-select. And we are putting the onus on them to decide what they want in their vacation or their time away.
Yeah, right on. Well, I think from my point of view, from like the marketing side, I think it also is like a lot more authentic to see like, that first a lot of people want to make these videos perfectly polished and, bring in a professional videographer. And then sometimes we test videos like that against like UGC style, like taken from an iPhone. And then those do better, because it just looks more real. It looks more authentic, especially if the property's nice. Like a nice property is going to come through perfectly fine on an iPhone. Now there's a time and a place for professional photography and videography on a listing site, obviously, but you're talking about your own marketing that you were doing as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's head on over then to number 10. And don't worry, Thor, we're going to come back to you as well here in a second. So number 10 on Christina's list, he's like, no, not really. On Christina's list was not dedicating a specific budget, percentage, and communication plan for owner retention and new owner development. We've kind of touched on the new owner development piece maybe a second ago with the calendar, but what was the owner retention plan like? How do you keep the ones you do all that work to get them? How do you keep them in your program?
Sure. One of the things we started doing about year 5, I guess, after we started intentionally bringing owners on, thank you, Brooke, was sending them a Valentine's gift and saying, we love you. And it would have to be, our guidelines were, it had to be something Chattanooga. It had to be something useful that they would continue, not just something they'd toss in a drawer. And it had to be something interesting that really reflected who we were. And so we did things like one year we did slate cheese boards that had our logo in them. I still have some of those. I love those. One year, my eldest daughter, Lauren, who is an artist, threw mugs. So we did ceramic mugs that she handmade and stamped our logo and painted our logo in them. We still have some of those, which is really cool. One year, Katie had luggage carriers made that had the Chattanooga Vacation Rentals logo. So like a shower kit, a leather shower kit carrier thing with a zipper on it. Thor still has his and uses it every time we travel. And I feel like those things really just to show our owners we loved them, right? That intentional. So we made a budget category for that.
Right on. Well, let me go to you then, Thor. So number 7 on your list was finding out on the front end and, also figuring out a cadence, what method of communication each property owner preferred. So Christina talked about, showing love to the owners and sending them gifts and things like that. That's clever. But what about kind of the day-to-day communication and how did that help with retention as well?
That depends on the owner. Really, you have to figure out what they need for communication. If you got an investor who spent more money than he should have spent and he needs you have to hold his hand every day. You got to spend your time doing that. If you have somebody who's just got a second home and they don't really care that much about it, once a month, twice a month, you have to figure out which owner needs what and really attend to them. Because again, without the owner, you don't have a business.
I think predictive index and culture index taught me this too, where I was always expected people like our owners wanted to hear from me. They wanted to get the phone call, and I thought I was going above and beyond. And it was long. It was a lot of work, obviously, calling all these owners, especially when something happened, that we had a hurricane coming through or there was a massive floods or things like that. But many owners just wanted a quick text, so they communicate differently, like this could have been solved in an email. It was a comment I got one time, after I called them, and I was like, okay, but it's just understanding how they want to be. What's their preference of being communicated with? And I think maybe that's part of the onboarding process, understanding each owner individually. Is it an email, is it a text, or is it a phone call? Because each owner is probably going to be different.
Yeah. And then storing those preferences. And then maybe, Brooke, you could talk about retention as well. I mean, we talk all the time about getting new owners, and that's fantastic. But it doesn't matter if you can't keep them on the program, right? If they're just leaving out the back end, then marketing does nothing for new owners, right?
No, I mean, retention is the most important metric. There's a reason. The reason why companies are getting pretty good multiples is because of it's based a lot of times on that retention. But if you have poor retention, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's some companies out there, which we will not name, that are getting that are buying lots of companies, but they're losing almost all the inventory. So it's like they're paying all this money for properties that are just walking out the back door. So doubling down on investing and keeping those owners. I mean, I sold Vantage. I sold my equity in Vantage back in 2013. And I remember when my partner sold to another company, I mean, some of those properties that I onboarded, 10, 15 years before were still on there. So these are cash cow properties if you treat them right. But if you don't, guess what? There's a lot of competition and they will walk very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. Awesome. Well, Brooke, I think you've got one more question for Christina and Thor to kind of bring us to a close here. But this has been a great episode so far, so I thank you guys again for your time. But yeah, Brooke, what's our last question for Christina?
Of course. Yeah. So Christina, I'll go to you first and then Thor. But the question is, if you could go back in time and give your 25-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
Ooh. It doesn't have to be perfect. Be willing to walk through the door, take action, take opportunities. Be willing to do it.
Love it. Thor?
Being an entrepreneur is a lot of work, and it's a lot of fun too, building something that people want to buy and purchase and come to your place and enjoy it. But the biggest thing I would tell myself at 25 is always make time for yourself and always make time for your family.
Yeah.
Right on. I like those messages quite a bit. Well, again, thank you guys. Brooke, did we miss anything? Christina, Thor, did we miss anything? Or is that a good overview of your contribution to Vacation Rental Secrets?
Aw. I appreciate Brooke asking us when he first reached out. Both Thor and I were like, only 10? We have thousands. We've made every mistake, and some of them twice, So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. We will catch you on the next episode of Highlighting Vacation Rental Secrets. And we thank you for your time and attention. We'll catch you next time.